President Trump promoted the sanctions, claiming these are the strongest sanctions ever imposed by the U.S. Administration officials are expected to provide even more details on Monday. Let's bring in Trita Parsi, founder of the National Iranian American Council. He joins us now from Virginia. So, Trita, President Rouhani recently told his nation that the U.S. will cry for a few days and then eventually leave the region. So is he basically saying that Iran is there to play the long game, telling everyone to wait it out? And what kind of reaction can we expect on Monday from Iran?
Yes, and the long game here is not necessarily particularly long, because the calculation on the Iranian and the European, as well as the Chinese and Russian side, appears to be to just wait out another 2 years, because they're calculating that Trump will be a one-term president. And if they can just keep the Iranians in that deal for that long, making sure that Iran gets at least a little bit of the sanctions relief that it was promised, then they're hoping that the next American administration will come to its senses and try to get back into the agreement.
Iran has worked around sanctions before. What do you think is different this time? We know the EU and other countries, like you mentioned, China and Russia, are showing support. So how big of a role are they playing in softening the impact of these sanctions?
It remains to be seen, because the special vehicles that the Europeans have been working on in order to be able to enable trade outside of the American-controlled financial channels has not been put in place. It's not entirely clear. What is quite interesting is the political will on the European side to really defy the Trump administration. That, I think, has taken quite a few people by surprise. And if that political will is matched by technical skills and innovation, then the Iranians may very well be able to handle these sanctions because of the support that they will be getting from the other great powers.
We know there are some exemptions, half a dozen or so countries. Going forward, is this really a transition period for them, or will some of those countries, you think, continue doing business with Iran?
Their intent is to try to do business with Iran, because we have to keep one thing in mind. The Chinese, the Russians, the French, the Germans, the Brits, and the Iranians have all continued to live up to this agreement. The only country that is violating it, that is cheating it, is the United States. The other countries, for good reasons, are not in the mood of punishing Iran for actually having lived up to its obligations. So there is that will to try to make sure that trade is remaining in place despite these new difficulties that the American government is setting up, in order to make sure that the nuclear deal, which is a critical agreement, survives all of this.
And Trita, that being said, Iran holding up its end of the deal, how does this impact U.S. dealings with the DPRK on its nuclear issues there? We know that the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is meeting his counterpart on Monday ahead of Tuesday's election, so a lot going on. Just your take on that part of the equation.
Well, certainly no country is looking at the Trump administration and that it is now an administration that keeps its word, honors previous American agreements. And what we have seen so far is a lot of symbolics between the United States and North Korea. We have not seen anything of concrete measure that actually can last, not just for a couple of weeks or for a couple of months, or even for the lifespan of this administration, but that has the capacity of living on even when Trump no longer is in the White House.
Trita Parsi, always great to have your take. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.